We have a delight today as a speaker, and he was brought here due to the intercession of Roy Hyman. Roy, would you introduce our speaker here today? Thank you very much, Roy.
Thank you.
I started reading commentary in Naples Daily News, much to my surprise, and came across some very interesting articles written by a man that I started to communicate with and found out more about as this time went on. Jack Tymann has had a 37-year career at Westinghouse/CBS as retired corporation president of the international division. Since then, he has been the president of Homeland Security Partners. At Westinghouse, Jack led business development in 75 nations and launched partnerships through Westinghouse throughout the world. From 1993 to 2001, Jack served on and chaired for 3 years the Middle East U.S. President's Council, appointed by both Presidents Clinton and Mubarak. In this role, he met regularly with Arab and Israeli leaders and spoke at various world economic forums in Davos and throughout the Middle East. Jack currently serves on the board of directors of Amid East, a nonprofit entity that for 55 years has been promoting improved education and mutual understanding between Americans and the peoples of the Middle East, North Africa. Jack is a regular contributor to newsbalance.com, a guest commentator, of course, for the Naples Daily News, and a regular guest on Naples Talk Radio. Please give us a big hand for Jack Tymann, who's
Thanks for the introduction, Roy. I'm here not as, I saw in one of your publications that I'm here as some sort of expert. And certainly I'm not an expert in the Middle East, even though I spent 40 years there. Because the more time I spend there and work with the folks in the Middle East, the less I understood them. And I've dealt around the world in 75 countries. I understand and I've worked with every culture. The most difficult one for us to work with is the Muslim culture in the Middle East. I speak more Persian and Farsi than Arabic. I speak enough words in 75 languages to get by with hello. But I'm not fluent enough. And in the Middle East, you do not need to speak Arabic at all. Not anywhere in the Middle East, unless you're speaking to a terrorist. So I'm here pretty much the same as you. I'm a political junkie like a lot of you, but I'm also a parent, grandparent of 10 wonderful kids, and I'm here concerned about our nation, specifically concerned about Islamic fundamentalism, extremism, and the impact it's having on the world and will have on the future of the world. I'm here worried about the U.S. economy. We can talk about that if you want, but that's not my expertise. But I'm here worried about those subjects, not as any kind of expert. Certainly not as a terrorism expert. Anytime you watch the cable news channels and you see terrorism expert, turn that channel off. There's no such thing as a terrorism expert. I'm not sure the terrorists are terrorism experts. The reason I speak publicly is, Roy talked about my background a little bit. Some of the things that affect me most profoundly, I'll just share with you briefly. I lived in Tehran in the 1970s, traveled back and forth to Iran, and then moved my family, 4 very young kids, into Tehran in 1977. We lived there 77, 78. We lived before and then during the Iranian Revolution. And it was there that I first came to understand terrorism and extremism, because my family was terrorized. We had a red X painted on our gate in goat's blood. We had a note thrown over our wall saying Yankee, YLNKE, Yankee go home. We know who you are. We obviously know where you live. We know your children, they're beautiful children, but if you're not out of Tehran by December 1st, we'll have to kill your children. And I think they used the word beheaded, as I recall. That kind of gets your attention. And we were living in a country with a powerful dictator, a Shah, tremendous support at that time from the United States government, or actually it was fading at that time under Jimmy Carter, but we had support for a long time. And a handful of terrorists who didn't know who they were living in the shadows. They couldn't even pronounce the name Khomeini in Iran anymore. They couldn't defend Tehran anyway. They were 1979, when we couldn't land a helicopter in the desert and do anything about it. The entire Muslim radical part of the world was empowered by the fact that they could drive the United States and 1,000 companies and tens of thousands of employees out of Iran with threats like the ones I talked to you about. On the night of December 6th, we were still there. It's a holy period, a holy day of Ashura. That was the first day that about 1 million Iranians went to their rooftops and started wailing. I had no idea what they were wailing. You couldn't understand it, but if you've ever heard 1 million people wail on rooftops, which none of you have, it sticks with you. I can hear it in my head right now because it was so frightening. We had no electricity for 6-8 months. They would shut the power down at night during the revolution. So we had no electricity, and I heard this wailing, and I couldn't understand what they were saying. I went next door to my neighbor, who was a 3-star general in the sub-arc, like the CIA. And we had gone to his daughter's wedding. He'd been in our house for dinner and so forth. And I knocked on the door, and I asked the general, General, what's going on? What is that noise? What are they screaming? And he looked at me and said, I don't hear anything, and he closed the door. I was an infidel all of a sudden. There was a revolution going on. It was such a stunning feeling with 4 little kids in the house next door that I was there to protect. And we left. All the Americans left. We were sued in The Hague. It took 15 years until we paid back to the Iranian government billions of dollars because we had walked out with contracts. That started the modern jihad revolution going on right now. But jihad predates that by unfortunately 1,400 years. But that was the one event that launched a number of attacks on the West throughout the 80s and the 90s and into September 11th. That had a tremendous impact on me. I continued in that region and around the world, forming joint ventures with Muslim countries, among others. And then was, as Roy pointed out, appointed to the President's Council. And that was a council from 1992 to 2001, right up until September 11th on we were a group of executives. We were appointed by President Clinton, but 100% of us were not. None of us were Democrats, I'll put it that way, because we were international businessmen. And our mission was to privatize the peace process, to try to get Arab nations, Muslim nations, foreign nations with each other and with Israel, but even with each other. And our success in those 9 or 10 years was zero. And I learned a great deal about their inability not only to get along with us, but to get along with each other. And then 9/11 happened. My wife and I are both native New Yorkers. We watched the World Trade Centers being built, and then we watched on television as they fell from our house in D.C., a mile from the Pentagon, and we heard the plane go into the Pentagon. It had a profound impact on me. Westinghouse had just been shut down, and that's when I began writing publicly and speaking publicly on this subject. I do it for one reason, free breakfast. That's the only thing I get out of this. And I'm very, very concerned with what's going on and with my understanding of what's going on. I'm very concerned about partisan politics and the war within the United States, because that's ultimately the only thing that can defeat us. So, what are my thoughts about all this, what's going on? Jihad, Islamic fundamentalism, whatever you want to call it, extremism, radicalism. It's serious. It's extremely complex, and it's an unprecedented threat, a threat beyond anything we experienced in the last century. Because it's like a cancer that's metastasizing. It's very slow. You can't see it. There's no uniform. There's no government leading this. It's an ideological disease, and it's going to be with us for a long term. It's not going to be solved in the next presidential administration. May not be solved in the next 30 or 40 or 50 years. It's exacerbated at home here by 2 things, and that's our dependence on Middle East oil, or the whole Western world's dependence on Middle East oil is a better way of putting it, and by our porous borders. That's our porous not just to Latinos, but to those who would kill us if they could. And to win this battle, this struggle, we have to do 4 things, and it's the same thing you do in your families, in your schools, in your businesses, in this little organization of yours. It's so simple. I'm writing a book about it, and I call it A Search for Common Goals. The first thing you have to do with anything going on is understand the problem of threat you're dealing with. In the United States, you don't understand the problem of threat you're dealing with at all. Many are in denial about it. And then, once you understand it as a community, as an organization, you then have to set some common goals, some broad, long-term goals. You can't say, like we do on our TVs now, that this fast food fix this thing, and let's get it fixed within the next year. Let's have a 48-hour war and we'll all be over it. You have to understand the challenge, how complex it is, and then set some long-term common goals. And only then should you begin discussing ways forward. We jump into discussions instantaneously when there's a problem in this world or in TVs. We need to discuss possible ways forward. After you set the goal, if you pull out a goal, and you got to do this in a civil manner. You can't do this in a vitriolic, partisan manner. And then the fourth part of it is to act, but you got to do it in that sequence: understanding, uniting, then discussing possible ways forward and alternatives, and then action. We're not doing any of that. Do you want to take questions as I go? Yeah, go ahead.
Just trying to get an idea of your estimate of how many, I guess I'm asking for percentage, the people that are in charge of, the leaders, and how many of them are...
In the U.S.?
No, the bad guys.
Oh, the bad guys.
What is the percentage of the bad guys of the total population?
Oh, that's a valid question. That's a very important question.
And also, what is, I guess, on the percentage that just take orders and, it's a paycheck for them.
All right. First of all, that's actually the body of what I'm going to talk about, because it's probably the most seriously misunderstood and misunderestimated, right? Part of the problem. In this world right now, there's 1.3 billion Muslims. When I answer your question, I want to take out of the equation those in the United States, although I do not dismiss them as a problem. Let me take out a very, very tiny number of Muslims in the United States, because we're confused as if they are the Muslim population. They're the most advanced, educated Muslims in the world, or among them in the United States. And to a lesser extent, I'd almost like to dismiss Europe, because the numbers are small in Europe, albeit the numbers are growing fantastically high at a rapid rate in Europe. In the world, there are 1.3 billion Muslims. We think that's probably a low number. That means there's more Muslims than there are Jews and Christians combined. Of that number, some tremendously high percentage of them, and I've read enough of it, I would say it's 80% of them, are educated from very, very early ages, pre-kindergarten, are educated in madrasas. And the population of that 1.3 billion, right now, the average age is in the teens somewhere, because, I hate to use this word, they're breeding. The birth rate in the Muslim world is much, much higher. Well, it's very high. The population growth in the Judeo Christian world is in decline. That's a fact. And you have to look at those macro demographic statistics to understand that the Muslim population in 50 years will be more than half of the world. Right? That's where we're headed. Right? I don't care what religion people are, as long as they don't want to cut my grandchildren's heads off. These people are educated not in the school system. There is no school system, private school system for 90-some% of those Muslims who are in. They go to madrasas. When they enter a madrasa, and by the way, there's about 60,000-70,000 madrasas or schools in the world, and there are probably going to be a couple built while they happen this crisis. The numbers are staggering, and they're funded from the Wahhabis, who don't like to be called Wahhabis.
Could you define the madrasa?
A madrasa is a school, but it's not a school. I'm sorry, it's not a school because you don't go in there to learn reading, writing, arithmetic. You may learn reading, writing, arithmetic. You go in there to learn the Quran, and you learn the Quran the way that the Islamists want you to learn it. That's the purpose of the school. I think it was Marshall Stone on both said, you give me a young mind at age 5, 6, and 7, I've got that person for the rest of their life. Now, fortunately, they don't get old. Some of them turn into be very, very good citizens and caring citizens. But the numbers are scary. And the estimates, and a lot of attempts to estimate the answer to your question, is so important. The estimates are that a very high percentage of the young Muslims of the world have leanings to support militant jihad. And the rest is talk, when I use the word jihad, can I just use the word, and you assume I'm talking militant jihad, because there is another jihad, which is the personal jihad. Jihad, by the way, have you ever heard the term Mein Kampf? Do you know what Mein Kampf means? My struggle? Jihad means struggle. And that they are taught in the Islamic schools to raise their hand this way. That's what they do. You can see a film, I'm going to offer you a chance to see a film on this later. 99% of Americans, including some Ron Paul supporters, do not know that this exists in the world today. It is very, very frightening. Those that are really radical jihadists or would sign up for suicide missions or homicide, or much better call it homicide missions, it's estimated to be as high as 10%, but nobody says lower than 5%. And that, if you take that number, you're talking about 30 or 40 or 50 or 100 million jihadists spread around the world. That is scary to me. So I'm called an alarmist when I say this. I'm an alarmist because I'm alarmed. And I have 10 grandchildren, and I'm worried about my grandchildren's grandchildren. And I think we are ignoring or misunderstanding or certainly misunderestimating a very, very serious threat. The threat is rooted in the history of Islam. I don't care if there's any Muslims in the room, because I don't know if I have a problem on me, but I talk about the history of Islam. It was started by a prophet called Muhammad. He started in 622 after being driven out of Mecca twice, marching an army of thugs of about 80 people. This is not Buddha or Jesus Christ, by the way. Marching them into the area which is now called Medina, killing off everyone in about 8 tribes, except for one tribe he couldn't defeat. It happened to be a tribe of Jewish people. They fought for about 10 days. They tried to negotiate with him, but every night the prophet Gabriel came to him and said, you shouldn't negotiate with them. And then he called them all into the center of town. This is historic. In any readings about Muhammad, called them into the center of town, called 600 soldiers and about 800 or 900 women and children. They had every male, then dismembered them and put their parts into pits. And then he personally took an 8-year-old girl as his sex slave, and the rest of the soldiers took girls, women, and then he took the rest of them and sold them into a slavery, and that's how they purchased their first bank of weapons to start a march in 622 that's been going on and off for 1,400 years. Islam was spread to become the largest religion in the world, not by Mother Teresa's going around giving speeches. It was spread by the sword. That's a fact that many people don't want to talk about. So, as a result, today it's more serious than ever before. It's global. It's funded. There are schools. There are mosques, and they have access to something that we gave them, which is technology. They talk to each other. It's the first time in history, 1,400 years, they can talk to each other instantaneously over satellites, over the internet, over cell phones, and they have lots of money and lots of weapons, and they have a lust for, and you can read it in their own writings, a lust for WMD. These jihadists are united, they're obsessed, they're patient, they're ruthless, and they're committed to their goal. The United States of America has none of those features going on right now.
Jack, what's the good news?
Well, the good news is we can beat them. The good news is we can do anything we want in this country if you unite. When I give this talk, people say, oh my God, the guy's an alarmist, he's crazy, and he's a warmonger or something. I'm not any of that. What I am is trying to share a view that's based on deep knowledge of that region and ask this country to unite and understand what's going on, because there's no way we can lose this battle. And I mean, we the West, we the United States and the West, if we unite. On the other side, we stay divided and focused on the enemy within, we will lose. So, you know, what they want, these jihadists, is, and it's clear again in their writings, they want subjugation of all infidels, or death of all infidels. They want Sharia law, which none of you would want to live under. And they want to return to the caliphate, their own version of the Vatican, I suppose you might call it. So what do we do about it? And that's where I'll move here. First of all, we need common goals. And people say, well, you can't have common goals in this political environment. That's not true. You can have a common goal on anything going on in this country right now. If you set the goal, macro and far out. So the goal I suggest in this area is to end global jihad understanding that's going to take about 50 years. Let's pick it up for 50 years. It's not going to be 5 or 10 years. So we set a goal of ending global jihad, just like we set a goal of ending totalitarianism and fascism and the evils of communism. To do that means that this is not about the next election or the election after that. This is a national goal, which then we have to lead becoming a goal of the whole Western world, the whole Judeo-Christian world. In the near term, though, we can't, when we understand it's going to take 50 years, we have to do several things. We have to stop these people, or make it more difficult for them. Somebody asked a question, organization. There's no organization. People talk about Al-Qaeda, they want to join an organization chart. Al-Qaeda is not an organization, it's an ideology. And some of them are not president of any organization. This is nonsense. It's an ideology, and it's like a cancer, and it's probably 2 or 3 dozen heads of it, but by different names around the world. All the same cancer, all united by one thing: death to infidels, subjugation of them, and Sharia law. We cannot allow them to have state sponsorship or financing. We have to stop that wherever we can. We certainly cannot allow them to have WMD, and the WMD I worry about by far the most is biological, not nuclear. And I don't want to scare you with politically correct, but there are writings and documents of what they're studying, and includes the word Ebola. These people are not sane. Biological weapons are much easier to transport than nuclear weapons. So what do? We have to secure our borders. We're talking about, whatever it is, 15 million or 20 million Latinos. What if, something I heard Giuliani last week said, suppose 1,000 people cross our borders every day illegally, and I think that number is low. He said, what if two of them want to hurt us? 2 of them. They're selling passports in Venezuela to Muslims. There was a group of Turks arrested here in Naples, didn't make the national news, 3 years ago, a group of Turks who were selling driver's licenses. 9 of the 19 hijackers had Florida driver's licenses, along with a couple other licenses. Does anyone think there are none of them here? Maybe there's only 100 here, maybe there's 1,000. Some people say it's a lot more than that, I don't know. We've got to secure our borders for that reason, the national security. And the other thing we have to do is become energy independent. Because as long as the world is dependent on the richest, cheapest crude in the world, it's $100 a barrel, it's very cheap to pull out of the ground, this problem's not going to go away. And we have known that for 40 years, have no energy policy. This is unconscionable. And the only answer, I think windmills have a place, I think solar has a place for maybe 1 or 2% of our energy needs. We have to go nuclear. The whole world is going nuclear. There has not been a single fish killed by a nuclear power plant except one case, Chernobyl. And that was when the Russian scientists cheated about a dozen airlines. It was our design. I'm from Westinghouse. We know how it happened. We don't talk a lot about it. That was horrible what the Russians did. Nuclear is the safest, cleanest form of energy in the world. And all of our Western allies are building nuclear plants today. There's over 100 under construction right now this year. In the world, 0 in the United States.
What are they doing with their waste?
The waste, let me answer the question. The waste can be solved. Westinghouse, I'm going back when we were in the business, we led the world in 30 years ago. We were well on the way to a breeder reactor. We must invest in breeder technology, in recycling materials, so that there's no waste. In the meantime, the waste is a very serious problem all over Europe, all over Asia. It's a problem. It has to be solved. But it's not the problem it's not the problem that's made out to be, in the sense that even those people have ways of sealing, and they know where it is. But ultimately, we're going to have to come up with a breeder reactor so there is no waste. And the waste is being reduced with technology right now. But that is by far the most serious question about nuclear. The only question about it.
The fish around Turkey Point have increased 100%.
Well, no,
my cousin's been out there for
what happens is the water temperature goes up. Do you think the fish, because they put a nuclear power plant, that says, well, I think our swimmer, I used to swim a couple of years ago, and he swims in there and gets burned up? I mean, this is so silly. No, the fish are increasing because the warm water is actually creating new havens for certain types of fish and so forth. I shouldn't have gotten into that. What I'm worried about is all of these issues. Going back to Pogo, we have not the enemy, and he is us. We have a senseless internal war going on, divisive, and could kill this country. and we've got to stop it.
Jack, talk about the relationship of the Saudis to the rest of the Middle East and the Wahhabis and their influence on.
Well, it's some people estimate as much as 90% of the money, not 70, but 90% of the money for the spread of what they don't like to be called Wahhabism, which is a fundamental radical right-wing form of Islam, is coming from Saudi Arabia right now. But when I hear the politicians say, well, we are, pissed off Saudi and so forth and so on, these are complex issues. These are very complex issues. And again, if we weren't being dependent on their oil, then we'd have a different answer. But right now, we have to find a way of dealing with Pakistan and Saudi Arabia. And Saudi Arabia doesn't need any of our money. It's not a problem. Yes, go ahead.